to travel to other worlds. Until recently, this seemed to be an impossibility. But great new discoveries have brought us to the threshold of a new frontier, the frontier of interplanetary space.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Planet Ping Pong Podcast, a podcast that's all about table tennis news, reviews, discussions, news updates, all that kind of stuff. And I'm probably going to get distracted somewhere along the lines, but at least for now, we do have some news to cover at the beginning of the episode. But before we get to that, just want to mention a quick little thing that last week there was no episode of the podcast, and that is because I have actually been kind of busy with my summer classes. Yes, I'm a student and I'm still taking classes even during the summer, just to keep myself from being too bored. But because of it, I've been a bit busy, and so I haven't been able to dedicate too much time to this or the Instagram page. But with my classes wrapping up in the next week and a half, then I should be able to dedicate a little bit more time and to kind of do this a bit more consistently as well. Maybe put out stuff on the same day and whatnot, but we'll see. Anyway, like I mentioned, there is actually a bit of news that we can cover at the beginning of the episode today. And for the main topic, we're going to be talking all about table tennis and its history in the Olympics. So without further ado, let's get started with today's news. Look, I mentioned that there were going to be some news today, but I didn't say whether they were good news or bad news. Unfortunately, this kind of sucks. These are some bad news, but I know that all of us are really anxious to get back into the world of table tennis. Like, I'm sure a lot of us have been wanting to put on those shoes again and go out to the gym and get a few good rallies in there. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there hasn't really been a whole lot of activity in the world of the sport right now. Even more unfortunately, it looks like the Hanabank 2020 Busan World Table Tennis Championships have been delayed again. If you've been keeping up with this tournament, you'll notice that this is the third time that it has been delayed, which is kind of crazy to think about because it was originally supposed to be held in March this year. So that was a few months ago, right? And then it was delayed up until June due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But even though Korea has been getting pretty good, I don't think there are too many cases or anything in Korea anymore. Because of fears surrounding another wave of COVID-19 and due to the restrictions of traveling, it has been delayed again to September 27th this year. But it got delayed one more time. It doesn't necessarily have an exact date anymore, but it looks like it's going to be held towards the beginning of 2021. So next year. We might be seeing this with quite a lot of other tournaments, which really sucks. I heard that there were some tournaments over in China supposed to be held in October, but we'll have to see if that actually pans out. This really kind of sucks because I know a lot of us are really excited and anxious to go watch some new professional table tennis because there hasn't been anything. There has been, I believe, one exhibition match in Sweden in between a few players or whatever, but there hasn't been anything that actually impacts the rankings. There hasn't been anything that actually impacts the competitive world or anything like that. And though there isn't an exact date for the new postponed tournament, it looks like the reason for its delay is because of the travel restrictions that are on really for every country in the world right now. Of course, the travel restrictions make things more difficult in the sense that people who are set to compete in this tournament, well, now it's not super guaranteed if they can actually go to that one tournament specifically. Like, for example, if for whatever reason, I don't know, a player from Japan wants to go to this Hanabank 2020 tournament, but because of their country's border restrictions and travel restrictions, they might not be able to go. And so, in the interest of fairness and, that kind of jazz, of course, they kind of postpone it until all countries can be attending without issue. Because then if we just kind of go with the tournament right now, it's going to kind of complicate things because we need to decide, okay, who's going to come, who's able to come, why couldn't they come? Will this affect their position in the rankings or even their ability to kind of maintain their position in the rankings? It just kind of complicates things. So it makes sense why the ITTF would decide to postpone the tournament until 2021. It sucks, but hopefully we might start getting some actual competitive tournaments if a lot of these countries see a decline in the amount of cases, and hopefully a lot of countries will be able to start reopening themselves again for travel so that these athletes can actually go and compete again. I guess one thing that this makes me think about is how the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, has been reopening their doors again. So, for those who don't know, of course, sports right now have been very slow. There really isn't a whole lot of competition going on at the moment. The UFC has been able to start putting on MMA shows again. And it makes me think about table tennis's kind of unique position that actually kind of ends up hurting it when it's trying to reopen again for international competition. When we compare it to the UFC has a bit of an advantage compared to other sports internationally. One of the big things about the UFC is that, one, a lot of their athletes on their roster are based in the United States. And so it's a lot easier to kind of keep up with the rankings if athletes are already in the country that they're supposed to fight in. And that, coupled with the stadium that's built by the UFC, it makes it really easy for athletes to compete against each other in mixed martial arts. The problem with table tennis is that, one, the international rankings are extremely diverse. And so it's a lot more difficult to kind of keep up with the rankings in an equal way when everybody is from a different country. Whereas in the US, a lot of the champions and a lot of the people who are in the high ranked positions are either in the US, North America, and some places in Europe that don't have as heavy restrictions as other countries. Another thing that kind of makes the position of table tennis kind of unique in a bit of a bad way is that table tennis athletes compete all time compared to other sports. Like if you look at a boxer or somebody who practices mixed martial arts, they're only competing about 1 or 2 times a year. Maybe three if they're healthy and if they're really lucky. But the problem is that because they only compete 1 or 2 times a year, it's okay to take off that bit of time to kind of think about what to do in terms of reopening the sport. And so, even if you're not competing for a solid 7 months, that doesn't really matter because you're only set to compete once every 6 months or whatever. So, it's just kind of like taking a bit of extra time off, and you can actually use that to train. The problem with table tennis is that because athletes compete so often, realistically, they could be competing once a month or something like that, especially if they're in the higher rankings, that it becomes really difficult to kind of calculate how this one tournament is going to be affecting the rankings as a whole. So it makes sense that the ITTF is pushing this back because if they don't, and we only have this one tournament and maybe another tournament a few weeks later, then it might mess up the rankings because some athletes are going to be able to compete more than others. Whereas in other sports like boxing and mixed martial arts, the athletes are set to compete 1 or 2 times a year anyway. And so for the world of table tennis, it looks like the better solution that might just be to wait until most big tournaments can just kind of start at the same time again so that one, all their athletes can compete equally, like in equal amounts, and so that it doesn't mess up the rankings and kind of skews it for people who can compete in comparison to those who can't. But then again, I still want stuff to just kind of start up again. You know, I miss this sport, dude. I miss watching it. You know what I mean? Anyway, why don't we just kind of get started with the main topic of the show today, table tennis at the Olympics. You know, just right off the bat, before we actually get started with the actual topic, One thing I want to mention is that it kind of gets on my nerves, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way. It does kind of get on my nerves when people ask me, "Oh, is table tennis an actual Olympic sport?" It's like, yeah, of course it is. It's an actually difficult sport. It kind of sucks that table tennis is so underrated in the world of sports. I don't know about Europe. I'm sure it's a lot more popular in Europe than it is here in North America, but it happens a lot here, especially in my area, where people go, "What? Is table tennis an actual Olympic sport? Is it a sport really?" And I'm like, "Yes. Yes to both questions." Anyway, so let's get started with the topic of table tennis at the Summer Olympics. For listeners at home, I actually just want you to take a little bit of time, maybe just to join in on the little game that we have here. So, I want you to first take a guess at what year table tennis made its debut in the Summer Olympics. And I know it kind of seems like a bit of a modern sport, especially because it's growing more and more in the past few years, but can you guess what year it started? Because if you guessed 2000, well, you're wrong. It actually started in 1988. Which city? For a lot of people who are thinking right now, if you don't know the answer exactly, you might think that it started in China, which might explain the dominance of China in the world of table tennis, right? But actually, it started in Seoul, South Korea. I think it's really cool that it actually didn't start in China, even though there is such a heavy presence of China in the rankings and in the Olympic championship positions. Now, both men and women's table tennis started both at the same time in 1988 in Seoul, South Korea. But today, what I want to do is just kind of go over some of the more interesting notes about the evolution of table tennis in the Olympics. So I kind of want to talk about, what country has been dominant, which players have been dominant, which players have made more than one appearance, and who has gotten medals more than once. Just stuff like that. And just to actually start off, in the men's singles category, it wasn't until 1996 in Atlanta when China saw its first Olympic gold champion. The two Olympics before that, so in 1988 and 1992, the gold medals went to Yu Nam-kyu from South Korea and, of course, Jan Ove Waldner, Sweden's own, the master of IKEA. Jan Ove Waldner, one of the GOATs, won in 1992 the gold medal. But it wasn't until 1996 when Liu Guoliang won the gold medal in men's singles. It's a bit of a different story for women's singles because since 1988 until 2016, it has been a clean slate gold medal slim ride for women in China. In 1988, it was Chen Jing who won the gold medal in women's singles, and in 2016, it was Ding Ning. Man, holy crap, that's crazy. I thought it would be a little bit more varied than that. Jesus. The men's singles category seems to be a lot more diverse when it comes to who won their medals in terms of countries. And so, of course, in 1988 and 1992, we had South Korea and Sweden claiming gold. But interestingly enough, 1992 was actually a pretty good time for Europe in the Olympics when in first place, of course, we had Sweden with Jan Ove Waldner, but in silver, second place, we actually had a player from France. As far as men's singles go, this is the only time that France has gone into the top three for men's singles and women's singles as well. The silver medal went to Jean-Philippe Gatien from France, and the bronze was actually a tie in between Kim Tae-soo from South Korea and Ma Wenge from China. Another kind of surprising thing is that in the men's singles category, Japan is also pretty small. It has a very small presence as far as medal wins goes. For example, Jun Mizutani in 2016 in Rio is the only Japanese table tennis Olympian to get a medal, and he got bronze in the 2016 games. You'd think that Japan would have a bit more of a heavier presence, especially because Japan has so many good players, both in women's and men's. I was actually kind of surprised to look at the women's categories for singles as well, because Japan has not won a medal in the Olympics. Crazy, right? Actually, there have only been 5 countries in the gold, silver, and bronze positions at the Olympics for women's singles, of course. And so for gold, like I mentioned before, it has been a complete golden first place slate for China. However, in 1996 in Atlanta, Chinese Taipei or Taiwan actually had a silver medal. Interesting because I never knew that Taiwan had a silver medal in the Olympics. And in 2004, the second and third place went to North and South Korea, respectively. Another thing that's actually kind of interesting is that in 2012, Feng Tianwei from Singapore actually ended up getting the bronze medal. Another really interesting thing. However, aside from the few times that those countries have been able to get second and third place, really the whole women's division has been dominated by China. But I think that might actually change in the next few years, especially with players like Mima Ito coming up, who's currently ranked number 2. I think she's the big kind of dark horse that might actually be the one to take out a lot of these Chinese champions. We'll have to wait and see. But for doubles, again, it has been dominated by mostly China in both the men's and women's categories. However, with that being said, in the first place position in women's doubles in 1988, the gold medal actually went to South Korea. However, the rest of the time, from 1988 to 2004, it was, it was just China kind of winning. And in men's, it was kind of like that. But what I think is actually kind of interesting about doubles is that it's a bit more diverse as far as the countries who won. And so in men's, we had in 1988, I believe it was the country of Yugoslavia who won the silver medal in doubles. And in third place, it was actually South Korea. In 1992, the doubles category, the silver went to Germany, and it was a tie for doubles, bronze for South Korea. In the men's doubles positions for bronze in 2000, it was actually France who won the bronze medal, and in 2004, second place for doubles men's went to Hong Kong, and third went to Denmark. Pretty cool. I think it's a lot more diverse than singles, that's for sure. However, since 2008, doubles has actually been replaced with team play. This was done to lessen the emphasis on doubles and focus more on the country, I want to say. However, again, in both men's and women's, it has just been completely dominated by China. However, the cool thing about it is that it is actually kind of diverse for both men and women's teams, of course. So in 2008, second place went to Germany. In 2012, second place went to Korea, South Korea. And in 2016, third place went to Japan. And so a kind of resurgence for some of the other countries. Now that the emphasis has been placed more on team play rather than just traditional doubles. I have heard snippets here and there that the Olympic Commission has allowed for mixed doubles to start again from the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. So that means men and women playing on the same team. We're just going to have to wait for that, but I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see what kind of, combinations from players can come in and, win gold, win silver, all that kind of jazz. Women's teams has actually been pretty interesting because in 2008, the silver medal went to Singapore, and 2012, Japan, and most recently, women's teams in 2016 in Rio, silver went to Germany. Huh. I think that's a lot actually kind of cool. It does get a little bit tiring, I will say, especially in men's singles and women's singles when it's just China winning all the time. It does get a little bit stale. And so I think it's really cool to see that other countries are starting to come up, especially in the team categories, now that doubles has been swapped out for it. I guess just one more thing that I want to talk about for this topic is just the medalists in particular. And the first one that I want to talk about is Wang Hao from China. Of course, Wang Hao is the famous pen holder, and he came from that time when, around Malin, Timo Boll was still playing kind of in his younger years. That type of era, the early 2000s. But Wang Hao actually won 3 medals in a row. However, he got silver every single time. And I remember it was a pretty close match in between him and Zhang Jike, if I'm correctly, in 2012, where he got his third and last Olympic silver medal. So close, yet so far to gold, right? Yeah. And another crazy thing to think about is that the only category in both men's, women's, doubles, teams, singles, whatever, the only category and only year where there was not a single winner from China was 1988. In men's singles in 1988, first place went to South Korea, second again to South Korea, and third place to Sweden. That is the only category and only year where there has not been a player from China winning some sort of medal. That's crazy to think that the last time that happened was at the very beginning of the presence of table tennis at the Olympics. First place went to Yu Nam Kyu, second to Kim Ki-taik. Man, my pronunciations are not good. I'm not Korean. Don't bust me. And third place went to Erik Lind from Sweden. That's insane. But that makes me kind of think about who's going to be the next country or what player is going to come up and perhaps take that position of gold from the big cheese players from China. I've mentioned before that Mima Ito might actually be one of the players from the women's category to come up and be the dark horse in the category, but for men's, I have no idea. Dmitry Ovcharov from Germany got third place in 2012, and I hope that he can kind of kick back into gear for the Tokyo Olympics. Maybe he can pull off an upset of some sort. But for now, we're just going to have to wait and see which country and which players are going to be the ones coming up and perhaps beating the Chinese in table tennis at the Olympics. And with that, I think it's a pretty good place to leave this topic here for now. We might come back when the Tokyo Olympics start again, but for now, I think it's a good place to just kind of leave this here. I think it's so interesting to see table tennis, especially when it's at the Olympics, because this is really when the sport is kind of at its height. Because for a lot of athletes, including a lot of athletes from table tennis and other sports as well, not even just table tennis, the Olympics are really kind of the holy grail. This is really the point that a lot of athletes have completely dedicated their lives to. And I know there are tons of athletes who would rather choose a gold medal from the Olympics rather than making some cash from the world championships of their sports. Because, of course, the Olympic athletes don't really make too much money. But with the Olympics comes such a high level of prestige that a lot of athletes would rather just take that instead of the traditional world championship. But like I said, we're just going to leave it here for now. And there aren't any listener questions this week at all, but hopefully next week we'll have one. But for now, I just want to say thank you for listening. Of course, you can listen to us on Apple Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a lot of other platforms. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but I know there's a lot of places where you can listen to us. And if you're on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment or contact me through my Instagram at galaxytabletennis to submit your listener questions or anything like that. And with that, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.